and welcome to the Step Stories podcast. I'm your host, Robin Breuner, and I am profoundly honored to have my guest, Hope Edelman, here with me today. Hi, Hope.
Hey, Robin. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here today. It means a lot to me. Hope is the author of 8 nonfiction books, including Motherless Daughters and Motherless Mothers. And her most recent book is The AfterGrief, Finding Your Way Along the Long Arc of Loss. Her books have been published in 17 countries and 11 languages and have sold more than 1 million copies. She is the guru of Motherless Daughters. And that is the book she's best known for. And that was published in 1984. I have it right here. And I have a deep personal connection to this book. And luckily, I've gotten to know Hope a little bit in person in recent years, but I have felt this connection with her for many, many years because I was given a copy of this book when I was around 30 years old and had just had my first baby. And my mother had already been gone 20 years at that point. And I just felt so connected to you, Hope. And you are about the same age as me, and you lost your mother when you were 17, even though I lost my mother when I was 10. But she's been a very important person in my life for a long time. So anyway, I don't want to do all the talking. But Hope has touched the lives of millions of girls and women of all ages. So anyway, there's a lot more to say about her, but I wanted to talk about the book and ask you about it, what inspired you to write it, and how old were you when you wrote it, and go from there.
Oh, I thought I was a mature adult when I wrote that book, but really I was a baby. I wrote that book when I was 28 and 29 years old. So my mom had only been gone for about less than a dozen years. But I was looking for a book that whole time about what it meant to be a girl who loses a mother. And all the books about mother loss that I could find in the libraries and the bookstores were for adult women who had lost their mothers because statistically it's so much more common. Um, and we didn't have a voice out there in the literary world, anyone speaking for us to talk about this is what it feels like to lose a mom. This is how it might keep showing up throughout your life. These are the things you needed when your mom died. And if you didn't get them, here's how that might shape you. Here are ways to stay connected to your mom, to still feel close to her. Here's how your age at time of loss matters, how the way she died matters, none of that. So eventually I wrote the book myself because I couldn't find it. It was really that simple, kind of gutsy for someone so young. But I guess I had more courage than I thought back then.
Well, and I have to say, it's a little bit why I started this podcast, because I always wished there was a resource that maybe my stepmothers might have listened to, or maybe I could have listened to kind of understand that world a little bit more. And I haven't really found much out there about being a stepchild, there's more about being a step parent, but anyway, it's just these things aren't talked about as much. So yeah.
Well, I have the experience, wh- or the world that I work in is stepmothering or having a stepmother after your mother has died. So that's a very specific niche in the stepmothering world because there isn't another woman there co-raising the children after a divorce. So the stepmother takes on a different kind of role in the family because she is stepping in and filling that seat that the mother occupied and can no longer occupy in the physical world. And I'm going to guess that because this is true for so many women who were as young as you when your mom died, that the loss of your mom and the loss of your mom affected you, but what happened after, which included the stepmothers that came into your lives, probably affected you just as much in the long term. The quality of care you did or didn't get when there was a new woman in that position and your father's attention was spread out among his children and his new love interest. Would that be fair to say?
Very fair to say. Very fair to say. And well, I'm going to get to that in a second because I have more to say on that subject, but I actually pulled Motherless Daughters back out. She had a 20th anniversary edition come out, and it's already been a while since that's come out. But I was re-looking at some of the quotes inside the jacket, and the very first quote is from somebody that I actually know and took some writing classes from, Jennifer Locke, who wrote the New York Times bestselling author of Blackbird, Stillwater, Show Me the Way, and Found. She's a very good writing instructor, by the way. But I just wanted to read what she wrote about this book. In my lifetime, a handful of books will go down as life changers. Hope Edelman's Motherless Daughters is one of those books. Her bold and visionary work gave needed insight to my own struggles with mother loss. Prior to
Hmm.
Motherless Daughters, I was stuck in secret suffering. Motherless Daughters is an important book, and it endures as evidence of this truth. I think that is it just encapsulates what the book's
Yeah.
about. Amazing. I'm going to read one more and then we're going to go back to talking. But this is from Claire Bidwell Smith, the author of The Rules of Inheritance and Conscious Grieving. I know I don't have that written here, and I know you do a lot of work with her. She's an amazing author. But she wrote, "This book has profoundly changed my life and my view of what it meant to lose my mother. Hope's compassionate dedication to this subject immediately made me feel less alone in my plight and gave me great courage to move forward as a motherless daughter." I just love both of those quotes. And they really say not only about the book, but about Hope and what she does. And you speak, I know you speak all over the world and at conferences and venues. You've been up on Today, Good Morning America, CNN, KTLA. Hope's been published all over the place, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post. One smart lady, one wise, smart lady. So
Busy lady, yeah.
what do you like talking about most?
Um, I oh, I like talking about the stories that we create and to explain our lives to ourselves, and examining those stories and looking at how they might be revisited and revised. That's the work that I do as a writing instructor, but also the work that I do with motherless daughters at retreats and on support group calls that we do every week. And so I'm very interested in how we create a story to understand our lives. So I like talking about that a lot. But I can talk about almost anything that you've got on your agenda, Robin. Do you want to hit me up with some questions?
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about motherlessdaughters.com and how, like you just said, you host these intimate retreats and online support groups. I actually attended one that was so great. It was called Fathers, WTF. And
Oh, hashtag dad WTF. Yeah, that was a call we did because one of our retreat groups stayed up late at night in the dining hall telling stories about their dads. And a lot of those stories did include their dads, partners, new partners, dating, remarriage. And now, as adults looking back, see, as children, they understood it one way, but as adults looking back from an adult perspective, some of them thought, Dad, WTF, like, what were you thinking?
right.
And so we do a lot of talk. We talk a lot at the retreats about relationships with fathers, relationships with stepmothers, absolutely come up. But we also talk about, how two things can be true, meaning that maybe your dad made choices that weren't in your best interest, and also that he still at the same time could have thought he was making choices that were in your best interest. So we give some compassion and grace to the dads. It's not just about criticizing fathers and stepmothers. It really is about trying to understand what happened in our pasts from a more generous and adult perspective,
I think that's right.
and while holding people accountable for some of the choices they made at the same time.
But I think that I know what I found just from being on that was it was really interesting to see these other women who were struggling with trying to understand their fathers after their mother died, and why did they make these choices. And I learned a lot and matured a lot just from listening to the perspective of these other women.
Yeah.
I've given more grace to my father because I know he was doing his best. But I'd love you to just talk more about this subject. You were saying that in the back of Motherless Daughters, there was some statistics and some things that about this subject. Do you want to look at that and maybe talk about
Yeah,
that?
sure. Sure, sure. I mean, this goes back to the first edition of Motherless Daughters when I was writing the book, but I did a survey of several hundred women who had lost mothers when they were young, meaning up to and including age 25. And I was really curious about some of the statistics that started rising to the surface as the questionnaires were completed. And so I had asked, were your parents married, divorced, or separated at the time? 80% were married, 11% were divorced, and then the rest were separated, never married, or the mom was widowed because the dad had died first. Um, I asked, did your father remarry? So 59% of the fathers in this sample had remarried at least once. And when I asked how soon after your mother's death, of that 59%, 58% had remarried, not started dating, remarried within 2 years. So that's, about one third of the fathers in the sample. So about one third of the women in this sample had fathers who remarried within 2 years after their moms died. And then another 25%, it was 2 to 5 years. So that's 83% of the fathers had remarried within 5 years after their spouses died. And then we also asked, how would you describe your current relationship with your father if he's still living? Only 13% said excellent, which is not a very high number.
Mm.
33% good, 23% said fair, 31% said poor. And when we cross tabulated those results, we found that those who said that their current relationship with their father was either fair or poor were much more likely to be in the category with dads who had remarried within the first 2 years.
Mm.
So that seemed to be an indicator of a long-term fair or poor, by the daughter's assessment, relationship, which was very interesting to find. So when I went out and I was touring a lot for the book, the first edition, the second edition, doing a lot of in-person appearances at those times, occasionally a father would come to an event and be in the audience, and he would stand up, and there would be one or two maybe in a crowd of 100 or 120 people. And he would say, my wife died, a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 months ago, and I have a daughter, two daughters, three daughters. What would you recommend I do for them as their dad? And I've always said the same thing because this is what I believe to be true. I said, It's not may not be a popular answer, but the best thing you can do for them is not start dating seriously or remarry within the first year, and better if it's not within the first two, but definitely not within the first calendar year, because the kids need you there to go through those series of firsts without their mom. They need to know that you're there for them for the first birthday they have without their mom, the first Thanksgiving and holiday season they have without their mom, the first new day of school without their mom. They need you there for all of that, and to know that you are there for them and not already diverting your attention to somebody else, because that leaves them feeling alone. Also, you need to talk with them about their mom during this year, even if it's hard for you, even if it makes you cry. You need to reinforce their memories of their mom, or they will start losing them. You need to remind them of the things that you did together. You need to have pictures up around the house. And if or when a new woman comes into the house, you need to keep pictures of their mom around. If it doesn't feel appropriate to have pictures of her or the family out on the walls in the public space, then put them in the children's bedrooms so that they can still look at her. I don't know how many dads followed that advice, but they would always say, okay, thank you. I'll keep all that in mind, and then they'd always get a round of applause from the audience, from all the women, many of whom had fathers who didn't do any of those things.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
I do wanna say there's the
You
flip
made me
side
get
to that.
teary. Okay, you made me
There
get
is the
teary,
flip
I just have to say, because that
oh,
was what I wish my father could have done in that first year. So it just, oh, this is why I've always connected to you because you get it. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
but there's a flip side to that, which was my
Mm,
father, who never dated or remarried and left my mother's things in the house and the pictures out for 20 something years
mm.
until he died. And I'm not sure that was particularly healthy either for him or for his adult children who at a certain point wanted him to have a companion who could share responsibility and also make him happy. And I knowing all I know about motherless daughters' relationships with their stepmothers, and seeing and hearing so many stories about relationships that were not positive. It was surprising to me that I wished for a stepmother, but at a certain point I did for my dad to have that companionship, and I was sorry that he didn't, and I wish he had. Later in life, maybe when it wouldn't have affected me as much, because when you are a young child, right? I mean, you're living with a stepmother. It affects you and her behavior and your father's behavior with, in aligned or non-aligned with the stepmother is going to affect you a lot. I was doing a retreat I just came back from a 4-day retreat in Connecticut, 27 women. They were between the ages of 2 and 23 when their moms died. A lot of them did have stepmothers and ones who came into the family very quickly. And we were talking about the differences between losing a mom in your 20s or older and losing a mom when you're young. And they asked me why, I don't do retreats that are just, just up to us, that why I extended into the early 20s. And I said, we extended into the early 20s because up until the early 20s, you're still dependent on the family of origin. But if you were very young, like you, Robin, you were not only just dependent on the family of origin to help you meet your grief needs, which you simply could not do for yourself as a 10-year-old child, but the presence of a stepmother in the family affected you a lot more than being 25 or 26 and your dad remarrying in a year or two. You may not have been happy about it. The family structure would change, absolutely. But you probably wouldn't be living in the house every day unless you came from a culture where you were still living at home. But adults tend to not be as affected as much on a daily basis by a stepmother's presence as a young child would be. That goes without saying.
Absolutely. And I don't know, percentage wise, but I will say from my own experience, I was so mixed up because it happened so quickly after my mother died. But I was sort of excited. Okay, well, I don't have a mother. This will be nice to have a mother again. I really want a mother.
To be a
But
normal
then,
family, right?
yeah, I mean,
They
that
will look
was
like
my
you. Yeah.
my natural inclination. But the other piece of me, you got the devil and the angel on your shoulders, was saying, "Well, wait, but wait, this is your mom's barely died, like, and then the fairy tale of this new mother seems like it's going to be good and happy, and then life happens, and so it's I don't know. I wonder how many young girls and boys. This is not just about girls. Obviously, boys lose their mothers too.
Yeah.
Sort of feel that mixed feeling. I'm sure there's plenty.
You know, that you just brought up a distinction between the stories that we make up to understand things when we're children. And here's an example of how that story might change when you're an adult. I mean, I've heard of dads who are dating within 2 or 3 months, remarry within 6 to 9 months. Yep, and the children, I'm not saying this is your story, but I'm saying this story is out there, that
Mm.
the children accept that their dad met somebody really quickly and fell in love in this fairy tale manner and then got married. And, this mother enters the family, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the difficult. But as adults, as they start gaining more experience and wisdom and insight, They sometimes look back and say, "Wait a second, how did my dad meet someone so quickly after my mom died? How did he find someone 6 weeks later and marry her in 5 months? That's actually suspicious." And then
Mm,
they start poking around, and sometimes they find a story that they don't wanna find.
mm.
And then that, changes their version of history also.
Yeah.
So, that is a story we have heard at Motherless Daughters, and that brings up sometimes some really complicated emotions to work through, and it could be 10 or 20 years later after the fact.
But I also think, and I'm sure that that's true, especially if a mother had been sick for a long time, and wasn't, the marriage was not really there, and the mother wasn't really there. I can totally see that or understand that. And but also, isn't it true that men often tend to, after a divorce or the death
Mhm.
of a wife, I mean, I always got told, well, it's a good sign that a man had a happy marriage and a happy family, that they want to get remarried so quickly because they want to recreate the happiness that they had. And I don't know if that's a myth. I was always told that, but
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine that, like, with any myth, it's true for some people. I think it's also a story people make up so that they don't have to really question what's really going on here. Um, I think, when we look at dads who remarry quickly, we're looking at it sometimes several different levels of reasons why that happens. And some of them are true all at the same time, but we're looking at how men form attachments and get their attachment needs met. We're looking at how men grieve. We're looking often at very practical and logistical matters that they need to solve. And we're also looking at cultural messages. So you can pick any one of those and we can talk about them because each one of them gives an explanation for why a man might marry so fast. And for some fathers, it may be, two or three or four of those explanations all together.
well, we could keep talking about it, but one thing just popped into my mind, and obviously you're not a priest or a rabbi or a pastor, but I'm just, I got told my whole life, well, you know, things happen for a reason. Your mother died at 32, and, things happen for a reason, happen for the best. And I'm always been like, no. What was good about that? What was good about
Mhm.
a young woman at 32 years old dying with three little kids for no reason? Like, I don't know. I'm curious just for myself. What do you, I'm sure other young women have asked you about that. How do you deal with that? What do you think about that?
About someone saying that to you?
Yeah, and that concept of how you look at that, because it's troubled me my whole life.
Well, I look at that as a message about grief that an adult would pass on to a child in an attempt to help that child feel better.
Mm.
It doesn't these kinds of platitudes, it's what people use when they don't know what to say, and they are uncomfortable with having to face a child's grief for losing a mother, which is such a primal response. At the retreat that I just came from, we did an exercise with this. We wrote down all the messages that we had gotten about grief and about our moms dying when we were young and in the years that followed. Messages like, she's in a better place now, or everything happens for the best, or
Yeah.
God needed another angel, or your mom wouldn't want you to be sad, or you need to take care of your father now, or your siblings, all of these messages. And we
Yeah.
wrote down, who said them to us and under what circumstances, and then looked at how we might have internalized those messages and carried them forward. Sometimes, especially teenagers might flat out reject them and say, no, that's not right. But oftentimes younger kids who think that adults know better than they do will try to figure out how that could be true and then try to live up to certain standards. And they try to adapt their behaviors to make that statement true. And so we look at how that affected us over time. But then now, as adults looking back, we write a response from our adult self to that person who said it to us. What would you say to them now if you saw them saying that to a child now, what would you say?
Mm.
Or conversely, what would you say to a child now that
Yeah.
would be a better response? But so when someone said that to you, when that was the message you heard, how did you take that in? Like, what did you make that mean? Everything's happens for the best?
Yes, I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, things happen for a reason. Everything happens for the best, and it's like,
Okay.
really? I don't think so. So I
Did you
don't
move
know.
forward? Did you move forward in the world thinking that's not true? Nothing ever happens for the best?
I moved forward trying to I don't really want to get into a religious discussion, but it definitely confused me on these spiritual things of why do bad things happen to good people?
Sure.
I don't know. I've had a hard time buying that because there was really nothing good that came out of that
Right.
happening to my mother for us or for her and or for my father, honestly. So I don't know.
And what you're describing is an existential crisis. These are big
Yeah.
questions for a
Mm.
10-year-old to be asking. Or
Yeah.
be facing, or a 12-year-old or even a 14-year-old. And you're asking these kinds of big questions and not finding good answers long before most of your friends have to face this. So that
Mm.
shapes you, right? That makes you grow up in some ways and in some directions that your peer group didn't have to. And I would venture a guess that, if it wasn't the question itself, it was the existential crisis that stuck with you and started shaping some of your personality and your thoughts and your behaviors. How could it not?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I suppose it has always given me a lot more empathy for people going through death or divorce. Um But
Yeah.
also, I wanted to just say that Hope also is an incredible writing coach. And I actually attended a writer's retreat 7 years ago when I heard Hope was having this retreat and I rushed to go because I was so excited to meet her. And this was when I had the idea for Step Stories. And I wanted to go to the retreat because I had an idea to model this and make a book out of Step Stories out of her Letters from Motherless Daughters book. That is a collection of just letters that people have written to her over the years. And I met Michelle Bennett at that writer's retreat, who I interviewed for the podcast recently, and
That's
who's
great.
just a wonderful woman. And, but anyway, I think that Hope and Hope has helped me with the memoir that I've been working on. And I think that I'd like to know more about what inspired you beyond just writing the book initially to become a thought leader on this, on grief, on
Mhm.
trauma, everything. What inspired you, and how has this developed for you? Because you are tackling so much at once. I just want to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, when I wrote Motherless Daughters, I thought it would be a book that comes out in the world and answered a lot of questions for me and maybe would answer questions for other women. Honestly, I was so naive. I was so young. I was 29 when that book came out.
Wow.
I tell people I thought I would sell 100 copies and like 10 would be to my grandma. Like I had no idea that there were this many women out there
Yeah.
that would have been looking for this book like me because I had felt so isolated and alone. I didn't hardly know any other girls who had lost a mother. There was my sister and there was one other girl in our neighborhood whose mom died a year before mine, and that was it. So I thought this is a very, very rare thing. There can't be that many women out there. Now, I should have known if the publisher was doing a full scale book tour for me that started with the Today Show that, yes, there probably were
Wow.
a lot of other women out there that they wanted to reach. But again, I was so innocent and so young. So the book comes out, and then I'm flooded by the response. This was pre internet. The first edition of the book came out in 1994. So women were writing letters to the publisher to reach me. and handwritten letters often, or typed letters, pages and pages telling me their entire story of mother loss. It was extraordinary. I had no way of knowing to expect that. And so some of those letters came together into the second book, which was Letters from Motherless Daughters, which gave women the time and the space to tell their stories in full, because the original book just had little excerpts from the interviews that I had done. And then I started a nonprofit in New York City to try to meet the demand, because women wanted support groups, they wanted luncheons, they wanted ways to meet each other. This was right as the internet was coming around. And so the nonprofit existed for a couple of years. And then I went out in the world. I wrote more books. I raised two daughters. I had a very full life. I continued to speak on motherless daughters all the way up to 2020. My older daughter was in college. My younger daughter was in high school. And COVID came. And what we saw with COVID, two things. One was a lot of reactivated grief, a lot of fear for survival, which is one of the long-term effects of losing a mom when you're young, is being hypervigilant about your health, about your safety, about the safety of others. And so COVID threw people into higher levels of anxiety and reactivated grief, longing for their mothers, missing their mothers. And another thing happened, which was that Zoom developed. Before that, we were all on Skype for video calls, remember? And it wasn't so simple to do multiple, have 40 women on a screen at the same time on Skype. You could, but Zoom made it so much easier. And so when we were all under quarantine, Claire Bidwell Smith and I started bringing women together just to have a place once a week to be able to talk about what was coming up for us and say, yeah, I think this is related to early mother loss, and I'm scared for my kids, and I'm thinking of my mom a lot. And then it just grew beyond that, and beyond COVID, into a full-scale company. I also became a coach. Around 2015, I became a certified life coach specializing in grief and loss. And in 2016, Claire and I did the first Motherless Daughters retreat. So that predates COVID. So it's really since about 2015, 2016 that I've been doing this work, one-on-one coaching with women, really individualized programs, and the retreats, and now the calls and support groups online. So yeah, it's busy, but it's really rewarding work. I mean, to walk into a room with 27 women who are so brave, they're strangers, they're coming because they feel that something in their life needs to shift. Something's going on that's bringing up the grief for their mom, and they feel like they want to address it in a way that maybe individual therapy hasn't helped them come to terms with. And everyone sits the first night and they're a little bit apprehensive. They don't know what's going to happen next, but they've got this courage. And then 3 days later, to see the transformation that occurs, where they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel like they've found other women who get it, who understand what it was like to grow up without a mom. And then they have this sisterhood that stays in touch long after the 4 days that we spent together. I mean, to me, that feels like something sacred. It's the part of work that I love the most.
Well, you've given them a gift and on so many levels, especially that they can keep in touch with these people. They've got somebody else who gets them. I mean, that's incredible, especially for somebody who spent a lifetime feeling isolated and not understood in that area. So,
And whose emotions may have been dismissed or devalued or shut down when they were younger. I mean, one of the things that happens when a stepmother comes into the family very early, that is so unfortunate for a girl who has lost her mother to death, is that conversations about the mother will typically stop. And the kids may even be told, don't talk about your mom because it will upset your new mom. The kids may be told to call their stepmother mom, which can be really confusing because they know they had another mom. What happened to her? Why can't I talk about her? There's no photos around of her anymore. It's like an erasure. And it's horrifying for children to think that somebody can be erased in a family like that. So this is a place where they can come. They bring pictures of their moms. They can talk about their moms. We want to meet their moms. We want to know about them. We want to see the photos. And it may have been a really long time since, they've felt that they're in a place where that's welcome.
Well, and I have to say from my own experience, one of the reasons I feel that I had stability was my father was very good about keeping my mother's parents, who was an only child, my grandparents, in our lives. And he was good to my grandparents in that sense too, because they lost their only child.
Right.
And I give my stepmothers credit because they allowed this. And my extended family, and I have told this to friends too, who I've seen come in as an aunt. It is huge to have that connection still to your mother, but also just extended family in general, aunts, uncles coming in to be other mother figures too, to support these kids, whether it's a boy or a girl. And I can't express how much that helped me in my life.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm going to look up now because in this survey also, we asked the question, did you find a mother substitute after your mother died or
Hmm.
left? 63% of the women said yes. So, of those 63%, can I read to you the list of who those people were? Because
Yes,
it's
please.
kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Because we're
63,
talking, by the way, we're talking about blended families here. So this isn't only about step parents; it's blended families, and so that
yeah.
those those figures can be part of a blended family. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So, among this, from the 63% of women who said they found a mother substitute after their mother died, 33% said an aunt,
Hmm.
grandmother, 33%, a sister, 13%, typically an older sister, a teacher, 13%, a friend, 13%. Isn't that interesting? Sister, teacher, friend, all 13%.
Yeah.
9% said a neighbor had become their mother substitute, and only 7% listed a stepmother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right?
That is shocking.
Wow. I know. So very few of them had stepmothers who became their mother figures after their moms died, which is really unfortunate because that's the most likely person to step into that role for them. But, perhaps an aunt or a grandmother just as likely because they actually knew the mother. But what we see is that stepmothers who come in often feel so threatened by the attachments that the children still have to their biological mother. Of course, they still have an attachment to their mother, which needs to be honored and acknowledged, but she often feels threatened by it because if the kids have that attachment, does that mean her husband has that attachment too?
Mm.
And that's not okay because he needs to have that attachment to her. And there's just not enough education around for new in new marriages where one or both of the partners are widowed young to talk about how to make space for that prior relationship, especially when children are involved. Because there are ways to do it that can be non threatening if the lines of communication are open. But in so many families, it was just that erasure. This is your new mom. Don't talk about your old mom. It will upset your new mom. And kids don't want to rock the boat in a family. I mean, they've already been through a crisis, a cataclysmic event in the family. So they're usually looking for ways to just kind of keep things stable and secure and safe. And so if they're told talking about your mother will upset your stepmother, they will silence themselves in her presence or in their father's presence. Sometimes they'll talk among themselves, but sometimes they won't at all. And the reason that's a problem is because we know now, which we didn't know. What year did your mom die, Robin? Was it in the
1973.
Oh, 73. My
Yeah.
mom was 1981.
Hmm.
So in the 70s and the 80s, we were still the wider culture, Western culture, which is predominantly white Protestant culture in the US, but it encompasses other groups as well, was operating with the messaging that grief happens in stages and we move through them and we get to a place of acceptance and then we let go and we move on. We let go of that attachment and we move on.
Sure.
Right. I know, but that's my mom died in 1981. The social worker handed me a pamphlet about the 5 stages of grief so that I would understand what my process was going to be like. And when my process wasn't like that, I thought, well, I failed this test. I must have done it wrong. But it wasn't until really the mid-90s ish, but then even later, before it became common knowledge, that in fact, it is a healthier form of adjustment after someone dies to find new and different ways to maintain inner relationships with them and continue those bonds. They have to transfer from the physical world and our present day lives into memory and a relationship that we carry inside us. It's really, really important for children to be able to do that with a mother or a father or a sibling who dies. And you can't do that on your own as a child if no one will talk with you about your mom. You may try in certain ways. Maybe you have an item of hers that you hide and look at from time to time. That's a child's attempt to maintain a relationship. Maybe you have a letter she wrote you or a birthday card that you like to look at because it helps you feel like, you can still feel that love for her. But if you don't have adults around you who can help you maintain that connection, and this is why grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles can also be really important, because if they will tell you stories about your mom and remind you that yes, she lived, she was loved, she mattered, she still matters. It's okay to still love her. Those children will typically adjust better in the long term. It's the ones who are cut off from the relationship with their deceased parent who tend to struggle more over the years.
I have absolutely seen that, and I have lived it. Everything you're saying is so true. And one last thing I'll add to that is I know for myself, my husband lost his mother when he was young. His sister died when her boys were young. And I have friends also who lost parents young. And I know universally, all of us light up when somebody takes the time to say, I knew your mom. I remember the time when we did blah 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 blah, or she did blah 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 blah. Because, or even with my father, it's the same thing. It lights you up because it's like suddenly they're just here for a minute again. You're learning something about them. So I'm saying this to people listening too. If you know of somebody who's lost a parent, or sibling, whoever, do that for them if you have a second. It will light up their day and they won't forget it.
Absolutely. And there's no court of law that says a stepmother can't ask a child, tell me about your mom. Tell
Right.
me something about your mom. Did your mom used to do this for you? What did your mom cook that you liked? Maybe I can cook that for you too. Now, the kids may reject it by saying, you're not my mom. You can't do that. But they might say, sure, let's do that. Or let's cook it together the way that your mom used to make it for you. I think it's not that stepmothers come into a family with the intention of cutting children off from the relationship with their mom. It's that they're often not educated and supported in doing it in a way that doesn't feel threatening to them. And with more education and I think with more support in that area, we can foster much better relationships between stepchildren and their stepmothers after a mother has died. But in the past, at least, it's often been messy and damaging to the children, really damaging to the children when a woman comes into the family that they don't feel connected to or who they feel has rejected them. And let's also mention she may come into the family with her own children as well, which I know was a situation that you experienced where the birth order changes, the bedrooms get shuffled around, and everything that's familiar to a child gets upended. And that's another reason why I suggest that fathers try to wait at least a year or two before introducing all of those additional changes into a child's environment.
That is excellent. Those are excellent thoughts. And I was going to say, and you've kind of just done it, but I usually end the podcast with asking somebody if they have a word of wisdom, a thought, something to leave with the listeners. And I'm really listening, and I feel a little bit bad because we've been a little hard on stepmothers here, and and so I think if somebody's listening who is a stepmother or a step parent, I hope you'll take what Hope said in the sense of here are some things you can do because this is really hard on the kids, and so I'm thinking maybe you could leave a pearl of wisdom for a stepmother who's coming in and how to help this child who's lost their mother, what could you say?
Well, I think that first and foremost is to just communicate with your new spouse to mutually decide on a way, a place, and a time that their children's mother can be honored within this new family that helps you feel reassured that you are at this moment, the most important woman in his life because you are the one he's married to. He didn't make a choice between the two of you. Um, but also, you want to feel that he has adequately grieved his former spouse to the point where you both can have this conversation and neither of you feel threatened. Once the two of you have figured this out among yourselves, then you can, as a family, make decisions about how to acknowledge that there was another mother that was in this family before you. Are you going to help the kids celebrate her birthday? Are you going to just realize that the calendar date of her death might be a little more tender and just acknowledge that? Um, there can be conversations with older children that are more honest, that acknowledge that you are in the stepmother role, that you do not intend to replace their mother or become their mother. You will be someone different in their life, but you hope someone who they can trust and grow to love in a different way. It's when someone comes in and the mom's not talked about and the kids are told to call the stepmother mom, that the kids resist it because that woman is being offered to them as a replacement or a substitute, not as a corollary to their mom. This is someone different. This is someone who can fulfill a different role in your life. But some dads are just so eager to fill that space again emotionally in their own lives and practically in the household that they don't realize how important it is to continue to hold space for the children's mother and their prior spouse for as long as those kids remain in the household and even beyond. And there are beautiful ways that can be done. It's just, I think, needs to be done with kindness and self-compassion and intention.
That's amazing. You are amazing.
Oh,
And
too.
I was
Thank
thinking
you
that,
for doing
your
this.
own mother naming you Hope had no idea how prophetic that was and how much hope you were going to bring into the world for so many people. So I just want to thank you for being here so much today. I hope that listeners will go to her motherlessdaughters.com website to learn more about what Hope's doing, to join one of her retreats, her community support. Is there anything else you'd like to share about what you're doing or anything?
We have our next retreat coming up in Northern California at the end of January in Watsonville, California, at the Mount Madonna Center. We're really looking forward to that. It's the first time that we're going to be up there with this group. And then we have ongoing programs online. You can drop into the calls on Tuesdays or Thursdays. And I love the idea of considering doing something especially for stepmothers because I think there's an opportunity there, maybe
Let's
a
do that.
video and some worksheets and, something to help stepmothers because I have great compassion for them. They're
Hmm.
going into a situation that is, emotionally charged. And to have, just a few bits of guidance about how to do this and what to look for and can really make a huge difference in the lives of the kids and the stepmother's relationship with her stepchildren. It's not
And her
easy to come
spouse,
into
too.
a family. Yes,
Yeah.
it is not easy to come into a family where a mother has died and there are grieving children and a spouse who's grieving maybe very differently from the children because children grieve a certain way and men and women tend to grieve differently. I mean, men tend to grieve through action and activity and doing. And dating is a form of doing. It's fixing a
Mm.
problem, right? This is one reason why men start dating so quickly, whereas women tend to wait a longer time after a spouse dies before they remarry because their their form of grief is often about processing their emotions and talking about it and working through it. And with men, it's about fixing it.
Hmm.
And so dating and remarrying is a form of fix. And as you know, you and many of your listeners know, sometimes men realize after not too long a time that maybe this wasn't the best way to fix my feelings. And a lot of those first marriages after a wife dies don't last. But they can, I think, with a stepmother, very intentionally becoming aware of what everybody needs in that situation. And getting in touch with what she needs too. And trying to find a way that everybody in the family can get their needs met to the best of the family's ability.
Amazing. Amazing. And that is such a great idea. You should definitely do that because I think you'd have so many people who would love to figure things out in the best way to create the happiest families. So anyway, thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here and taking the
Thank you so
time out of your
much.
busy life. I really appreciate it. And I hope this helps many people listening. There's so many great nuggets of wisdom in here. So thank you for being here and talk
My
to you
pleasure,
soon.
Robin. Thank you.